expert Oluseye Soyode-Johnson. Thank you for your time, Oluseye.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Now, let me start with that very last statement. Can telecoms take over oil industry in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. I mean, that is a very interesting question, and that drives home to one of the most important things that the government has been trying to do over the last couple of years in terms of diversifying our economy away from just oil and gas. So, yes and no, right? The oil and gas industry is still very large, very strong. Globally, we're seeing some signs of it recovering. Oil and gas is still going to be there. But in terms of, the telecoms industry and the amazing growth that you alluded to just now over the last couple of years, we really see a trend that says that potentially telecommunications is one of our most important industries for the future. There are a couple of indicators that show that this growth is not about to abate anytime soon. First of all, we're going to see an increase in subscribers of about, say, 30 million over the next, say, 3 to 4 years, almost about 30 million. There's this shift from rural to urban in terms of our population dynamics that is really, really important, because there are statistics that show that as people join urban communities, they look to connect. Right? They look for jobs, they look for information, they look to make decisions faster, and telecommunications allows this. There's a high youth population. This is one of the most important things. Because globally, Nigeria will have the largest working population by, say, 2030. And this really creates a pool of people who need to connect, who need to make use of certain kinds of services, more data. These are the kinds of things that are contributing to that notion that potentially we might have reached that inflection point where, yes, telecoms hasn't overtaken oil and gas, but potentially in the next, say, 5 to 10 years, it really can.
Yes, in the next 5 to 10 years, it could contribute more. But let's talk about the GDP, its contribution to GDP that at the moment is at 9% in the first quarter of 2017. Now, how can that sector improve more in contribution to the GDP? Because I know, yeah, they've been able to create more employment in the country and some other things, but how can we get more from that sector?
Okay, this sector is doing a lot already. They're one of the largest employers. There's a lot that they've done to improve, not just directly in terms of monetary value, but even connecting businesses. The kind of things that get enabled because of our telecommunications infrastructure are unquantifiable, and this is seen in much more mature markets around the world. Right, the more connected you are, it's called IGDP. Right, the more connected you are, the faster SMEs grow. They actually grow twice as much the more connected you are across the world. Now, how do they get better? Well, the industry is facing quite a lot of issues and threats that potentially are slowing them down. So I would say they can do more, but then I think that a bit of an enabling environment around them can actually help to spur them, to really empower our economy, right? Regulation sometimes has been amazing, with the fine and looking after the interests of the consumer. But sometimes, those can sort of hamper innovation or industries that are trying to accelerate. Infrastructure is still very expensive, so in terms of power, competition is getting fiercer. Consumers are also changing in terms of their appetite, right, for data, and this is really where I think that the telcos can do more. As the African or Nigerian consumer changes in the way they like to consume content, in the kinds of content that they want to consume, right? We need to build the technologies and infrastructure that meets that need, right? And as quickly as these trends are happening, right? We see Facebook, who's looking to connect 4 billion people who are not connected to the internet for the very first time across the world, and Nigeria is actually a big part of that. Now, we need that kind of innovation to really access some of that latent and hidden potential for the industry.
Yeah, you said something about building the technology that meets that need, and that takes me to fintech. That's financial technology. I see many Africans. Fintech seems to be transforming the banking industry in Africa. Let's just connect it with that now. Now, tell me, how can fintech, from telecoms, fintech, how could it transform banking in Africa? Very briefly.
Okay, so fintech is already transforming banking in Africa. We're seeing banks looking towards the startup ecosystem, the technology ecosystem for their innovation, right? It's a lot harder sometimes as a more established player with a bit of bureaucracy. It's hard sometimes to take risks and try to change things from how they've always been. And startups can do this very easily. So we have a couple of leaders right now, especially in Nigeria, who are, being accelerated by foreign investment, which you were talking about before.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, at least 30% of foreign investment in fintech actually went to Africa. So Africa and fintech are hot right now. So in terms of how do startups really accelerate what's happening in banking? Well, there's a lot of inefficiencies, right? There's a lot of things that people want to do with their money, right? Yes, Access Bank and GT Bank and Wema Bank and all these guys have done a lot so far in terms of building online tools, amazing apps that connect us faster to the activities that we want to do. But then there's certain innovations that organizations like, say, Pay with Capture or Flutterwave or even mobile money providers like Paga can bring to the table, and that's already happening right now.
Oluseye, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to talk more about it. I'm very sure we could get you back, especially to talk more about this fintech and its effect on the Nigerian economy and, of course, Africa at large. Thank you for your time, telecommunications expert Oluseye Soyode-Johnson. Thank you.